Hey guys, it is the Comics Kid 2099, and recently, over the last few weeks, I have been in a mood to watch a lot of the DC Animated Universe stuff. If you've been keeping up with this channel for any length of time, you know that every other week I review an episode of Batman the Animated Series on Saturdays. So I've been doing that for a while now, but recently I went through, watched several episodes of Batman Beyond, and over the last couple of days, I've finished watching several episodes of Superman the Animated Series. And I was thinking, ever since about 2007 or so, the main people behind this show, they haven't really been doing any ongoing television shows. Actually, I was probably in high school whenever Justice League Unlimited ended, and I believe that was the last show, ongoing series, that these people did. But starting in 2007, we got Superman Doomsday, and that was the beginning of them working on a series of direct-to-DVD videos. I guess technically Brainiac Attacks came before that, but that was more part of the DC Animated Universe, whereas starting with Superman Doomsday, you had movies that stood by themselves. They made a point to say these are not canonical with the last 15 years of DC Animated Universe shows. And personally, I may get some flack for this, I don't know. I have always thought that this crew of people who worked on Batman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond, Justice League, Superman, I always thought that they did better on television shows rather than full-blown movies. I enjoy a couple of the movies that have come out since Superman Doomsday, but a lot of them I just found to be very lackluster in one way or another. And part of that could be that the entire group that had been working together for so long was not together. I think Bruce Timm is the only person who was working on the DC Animated Universe television shows and then moved on to these movies. For example, I don't think Paul Dini has worked on every single one of the movies. I know he did do some scripting for the short on the Batman Year One movie, but for the most part, the whole core team, I guess you could say, that brought us the DC Animated Universe, they were not together for all of these movies. And I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say that's probably a good reason why, in my humble opinion, the movies just don't arrive in the same way that the television shows do. A few months back, it was rumored that Bruce Timm might be returning to Justice League. I never actually sought out any of the articles that reported on this, so I don't know what the exact wording was on this news event, but it seems to me that he might be coming back to do a television series as opposed to continuing to do movies, because he's been involved with all of the movies ever since Superman Doomsday, and it wouldn't really be news in the same way that it was with this Justice League announcement. You know, if they said, hey, we're going to do a Justice League movie. Well, they did a few Justice League movies. They did Crisis on Earth 2, I think. They did New Frontier, and they did Tower of Babel. I think they didn't call it Tower of Babel. It was something else. So I don't think it would really be news if it was just, oh, he's going to do another Justice League animated movie. The way this article kind of spread out and reached me, it seemed to me that he was going to be returning to do a television series. And that got me thinking. I know this has been a long intro, but I kind of had a lot to say, I guess. That got me thinking, which television shows would I like to see the entire group of the DC Animated Universe production, which shows would I like to see them do? And with all of these, it would not have to be connected to the original DC Animated Universe. Some of them, in theory, could exist within the world of the Justice League or Batman the Animated Series. Some of them definitely could not. They would have to be a full-blown break. But ever since we've had, 6 or 7 shows ever since Justice League Unlimited ended that have definitely not been part of the DC Animated Universe, it wouldn't really need to be a continuation of that universe, especially since it's been several years since we had anything from that universe in any form. In fact, it might even be a little confusing to try and continue the DC animated universe after it's been so long since it ended. So this is 5 things that I would love to see done by the people who worked on the stuff like Batman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond, etc. The first one, this is also the only thing that is sort of a cheat. I would love to see those guys do just another Superman series. This is the only thing that is something we've already seen before. I really love the Superman animated series. I've found watching these episodes, I don't know why, but people don't seem to put it in as high a regard as they do Batman the Animated Series. I like Batman the Animated Series. I think it's very innovative, but I think also because I am a huge Batman fan, I know that if I was not able to watch Batman the Animated Series anymore, I could just go to the comics and I could just read the comics that I really love and I would be okay. With Superman, it could be because I don't find many Superman books to be very good. I really bonded with the animated series because it could be my Superman. If I was in a Superman mood, I'm not going to read a Superman book because I don't like a lot of them. Instead, I would go to the animated series. And while I loved it, I do think it could have used a lot of improvement. I know I said in a recent Missed Opportunities episode that I think that Batman Beyond would have been really made much more exceptional if it had been more of an arc type television show with long form stories. I think the same could be done with Superman. I think you could, in today's climate, after Young Justice, where that whole show was built on these very long storylines, I think you could do a show with an extended storyline. Heck, they did that with Justice League Unlimited. There was a whole storyline about Cadmus, and that was probably one of my favorite things ever. They could do this with Superman, and they wouldn't even have to do a full-on rebooted version of the character, although they would want to. Just from what I've heard from the commentaries and stuff, kind of gauging what I know of these creators, I can imagine them saying, well, we're doing a new version of Superman, we might as well update it a little bit. This is not 1996 anymore. And I could see them doing that, and I wouldn't have a problem with that. I wouldn't necessarily want to see them actively try to contradict the original animated series. I would just want to see new stories, and I think that would be really fun. Like I was saying, I really loved Superman the Animated Series. I just don't think we got enough of it. I could have easily seen that show going another couple of seasons, and I think it would have been awesome if they had done that. The next 4 things are all things that we have not seen in any capacity. It was very hard for me to come up with this list because several things that I would love to see that group of people do, we have already seen in some way. For instance, the Green Lantern series, I have never watched that show, but I would have loved to have seen those guys do a Green Lantern Corps television show. Just, set out in space. You're not allowed to do any stories on Earth. Just do space stories. You can focus on a different member of the Corps in each episode. I think that would have been killer. But since we've already had a Green Lantern television show, which, if I'm not mistaken, none of the people from the DC Animated Universe actually worked on that show, I didn't want to put that on my list because we've already had a Green Lantern show. Now, I don't know if it was good or not because I never watched it. Another show that I really wish we could have gotten as an extension of the DC Animated Universe would have been the Legion of Superheroes. But since we got a 2-season show around the time when Justice League Unlimited had come to an end, I'm not putting that on my list either because we already have a Legion show. And I'm not sure what all this group of people could do to differentiate their version of the Legion from that version, except maybe make their characters older so that it looks different. I don't know. I would love to see that, but I'm not putting that on my list because we've already had a Legion of Superheroes show. And so, trying to avoid some of the things that this group of people worked on, a straight-up solo Batman series, a Justice League series of some kind, and also trying to avoid things that were not strictly DC Animated Universe, like Green Lantern, Legion of Superheroes, or Teen Titans, which Glenn Murakami was over that, and he was part of the DCAU. Trying to avoid those things, I came up with these 4 things. The first, or I guess the second thing that I would love to see those guys do is a straight-up Earth 2 series. I've always had a soft spot for all of the characters who originated on Earth 2. Most of them, if you're unfamiliar with Earth 2 and kind of the DC Comics multiverse, basically, back in the 1940s, you had a certain group of characters, and then starting in the 50s, superheroes stopped selling well, so a lot of these characters stopped appearing in comic books. So you had the Flash, you had Green Lantern, you had Hawkman, you had the Atom. Those guys stopped appearing in the 50s, and then toward the later half of the 50s, you had a brand new version of the Flash, Green Lantern, Hawkman, the Atom. There was no reference to any of the previous versions except for the new Flash used to read Flash comics. And so basically it was then determined from that little scene, well, this new batch of heroes, they are not even living on the same planet Earth as the characters from the 1940s. And so there was this somewhat convoluted idea that any character from before 1950 or whatever was on Earth 2, which was basically more or less the same planet, but you had different people in the costumes for the most part. And they were also about 20 years older, because the characters on Earth 2, they fought in World War II, whereas the characters on Earth 1, they were all younger. They did not fight in World War II. And for this series, I would love to see them start shortly after the end of World War II, and then just kind of showing, okay, the battle is won. We've defeated the greatest evil that this planet has ever known. What do we do next? And then I would have it jump forward a few years so that the series would be set in the 50s. One story that has been used in a couple of different instances, once by Paul Levitz and once by Darwin Cook in DC The New Frontier, is the idea that the Justice Society of America was disbanded because the House Un-American Activities Committee tried to accuse them of being communists. That is a neat story, I think, but I would not want to see that in this cartoon. For one, I'm not sure if you could really do that in a cartoon aimed at younger audiences, but since we've seen with shows like Young Justice, that show was definitely not aimed at the same audiences as, say, Batman the Animated Series, so if they were aiming this at teenagers, then they maybe could do the House Un-American Activities thing. But just to do something different, I would rather they not do that. I would like to see just a show set a few years after World War II. You've got these characters, they've basically retired because there's not really anything left for them to fight. But then as the series starts, you might have a confluence of things that starts to happen. I'm not, doing a pitch or anything for this, so I'm not going to come up with ideas, but I just think it would have been a neat show. It could still be a neat show. Just any character who is on Earth 2. You could use Robin. I would love to see adult Robin, who's maybe gone to law school. You could do all sorts of neat things with the DC universe that a lot of non-comic book readers are very unfamiliar with. They would be floored by the idea that on this world, Robin is an adult, but he's not wearing the Nightwing costume. Batman, he's, in his 50s or early 60s. He's got a daughter who's fighting crime. All of that would be really cool. And it would be an ensemble show, sort of like Justice League Unlimited, I think, where you could focus on just a different couple of characters in each episode. And you could kind of reference the backstory from World War II. It would be a lot of fun. I would really, really dig that kind of series. The next series that I would like to see from this group of people would be a solo Flash series. This is probably the one, maybe two, that could, one of two that could maybe work in the original DC animated universe. Flash, we only got to see his rogues gallery and his home turf in one or two episodes of Justice League Unlimited. I know that Gorilla Grodd was a pretty recurring character in the Legion of Doom storyline, but other than that, we got to see him in his own city in, I think, one episode. And I think out of all of the characters in the Justice League who have not already had their own series, I think Flash would be the one character who could definitely sustain a series that could probably last about as long as Superman the Animated Series did or Justice League Unlimited did. I think he has maybe one of the most interesting rogues galleries in comics. I'm not saying that the rogues gallery for the Flash is the best one. I think Batman has the best villains, but I think that the Flash has very interesting villains. The whole idea that the rogues, they've got this camaraderie among themselves. They're not as evil as characters who fight Superman or Batman. I think all of that could be very interesting done in animated form. I also think that Flash's supporting cast is very interesting. Depending on which Flash you want to go with, if you do want to go with Wally West, who is the Flash in Justice League, you could have his girlfriend be the, I can't remember her name, Linda Park. I'm getting that wrong. Then you could have, you could maybe introduce Impulse, have this younger, much more impulsive character who Wally kind of has to man up and be much more of a mature adult in order to deal with this. It's all very interesting. And if you wanted to do Barry Allen, if you didn't want this to be part of the Justice League world, then you could just do the same thing with Wally West kind of being the immature one that forces Barry to try and grow up a little bit. It would be a very interesting show, I think, and like I said, out of all the characters in the DC universe, I think that Flash, outside of Batman and Superman, is the one who could definitely support his own television series. I'm actually surprised that outside of that live action show, we haven't gotten something like this already. The next one, this also could, in theory, work in the DC animated universe, but at the same time, it could work just as well as its own thing. I would like to see Batman and the Outsiders just basically straight up adapt the comics from the 80s. The whole idea of the Justice League has been asked to sit by and not do anything during a political fiasco that involves some hostages. And then Batman, he quits the Justice League so that he can go and act on this because the Justice League has been asked to sit out on this, and Batman forms his own team. The key difference between Batman working with this team and Batman working with the Justice League is that when you see Batman with the Justice League, he's an equal to everybody. He may, in some versions, like when Kyle Rayner or Wally West are on the team with him, he definitely kind of acts like he has seniority over them, and certainly so does Wonder Woman and Superman. They kind of act like they are more in charge than, say, Wally or Kyle. But for the most part, Batman is seen as an equal to everyone else on that team. With the Outsiders, he is definitely the guy in charge, and he is using this team to try and do things that he originally would not have been able to have done with the Justice League. This show also probably, I don't think it could last as long as like the Flash show or a second Superman show, but I think it could, in theory, last a couple of years, 2 seasons easily, and you could even do the thing where slowly Batman gets phased out of the team for whatever reason. I don't remember in the comics what the reason was that Batman stopped working with the Outsiders, but you could do something like that. I'm not very familiar with this series in the comics, so I don't know if there are any characters in that team who would not work in animation. I know Halo, she was a character in that team. She looks very 80s. She looks like a product of her time. So that character might have to be kind of redesigned a little bit in order to work in an animated series. But I think the story works very well and could easily be done as an animated series. The final show. This one was the hardest slot to fill. I was very tempted to put something like Legion of Superheroes or Teen Titans, but as I said, I wanted to try and avoid things that we have already seen before from the other animated universes, I guess you could say. This one is probably the one that would be the most risky. It is Warlord. In the 1980s, there was a very long-running series called Warlord, which was basically about this human being from the surface world who gets trapped in this underground civilization. And the whole series is basically a combination between just about any pulp story that you can think of. There's a little bit of Conan in there. There's a little bit of Cthulhu. There's a little bit of Flash Gordon. There's a little bit of Tarzan. It's all kind of blurred together into this genre stew, if you will. And it's basically just as awesome as it sounds. Now, this would be risky because Travis, whatever his name is, I can't think of his last name, the main character from Warlord, he is not one of the main Justice League members. He's kind of a character who a lot of people, even a lot of comic book characters, have not heard of. I think that it would still be an awesome series, and I don't even think people would necessarily need to know that it's based on comics. I think that people could watch this and enjoy it without having to know, oh, this was a DC comic from the 80s. I do not know if this character had a good supporting cast or villains, so that could be tricky. If he doesn't have a lot of really good villains, it might be hard to do this as an animated show. But I do know this series lasted for a long time. I think it was like 100 issues, and I've never read a lot of the comic, but I do find the premise very enjoyable, and I would really love to see more of it. Even, see, I haven't been a huge fan of the New 52, what I've read, but I would love to see it done now in comics even. If you can't do it in animated form, do it as a comic book again. The problem would be, I think they've tried to revive this title a couple of times, and I don't think it's worked out very well. I think the most successful version of this would be the first version of this comic book. And that is all I have. I know there are other things that I would love to see that did not make it on the list. For one, Doom Patrol. I would really love to see an animated Doom Patrol, but the reason it did not make it on the list is because I just don't see that being an ongoing thing. I can only see that working in very limited capacity, and I can't see people watching that without saying, oh, they ripped off the X-Men, even though Doom Patrol actually came out a few months before the X-Men, I believe. Yeah, that's about all I have. Anything else I could have talked about, there's a reason I didn't. So if your favorite DC Comics character didn't make it on this list, there's a reason why. I can't explain it because I don't know what your favorite DC Comics character is. So I am more or less rambling, so I am going to end this video here. Let me know what you guys thought of this, and I will be back tomorrow to talk about something else. I hope this video found you guys well. If it did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow.